The generator kicked to life at 3 in the morning, its familiar hum cutting through the silence of the Texas winter storm that had just knocked out power to our entire subdivision in Richardson. I stood at my back window, watching ice accumulate on the trees under the pale glow of my emergency lights, and thought about the 3 families whose lives literally depended on that machine running in my yard. My name is Xavier Young, and I had been living in the Willow Creek subdivision for 5 years when the winter storm of 2025 hit North Texas like a sledgehammer. Unlike most of my neighbors, I had prepared for this exact scenario after watching what happened during the 2021 freeze. I had invested in a commercial-grade natural gas generator that could power not just my house, but several others through a system I had carefully engineered with proper permits and electrical work. The 3 families connected to my generator were the Hendersons next door, the Martinses across the street, and the elderly couple, the Johnsons, 2 houses down. What made this arrangement critical was that Tom Henderson had a home dialysis machine he needed 4 times a week. Maria Martinez's 8-year-old daughter, Sophia, had a ventilator for her muscular dystrophy, and Robert Johnson had an oxygen concentrator running 24/7 for his severe COPD. These weren't conveniences. They were lifelines. I had worked with a licensed electrician to create a transfer system that could safely provide power to their medical equipment and essential heating systems. The whole setup had cost me nearly $30,000, but I had the means and the motivation. My own mother had died during a power outage when her medical equipment failed, and I had sworn I would never let that happen to anyone if I could prevent it. The HOA had been notified about the generator installation 2 years ago. I had submitted all the proper forms, obtained county permits, and even paid for a sound barrier wall to keep the noise minimal. The board at the time had approved it without issue, especially when I explained the medical necessity for my neighbors. Everything was legal, permitted, and frankly, nobody's business beyond that. But that was before Gertrude Patterson became the HOA president. Gertrude, or Gert the Tyrant, as some neighbors called her behind her back, had moved into the neighborhood 18 months ago and immediately inserted herself into every possible community matter. She was 52, drove a white Lexus SUV with custom plates that read Rules 1 Cent, and had the kind of haircut that screamed to speak to the manager. Within 6 months, she had maneuvered her way onto the HOA board, and within a year, she was president. Her first act was to revise the HOA bylaws to give herself more authority. Her second was to start issuing violations for everything from mailboxes being the wrong shade of black to grass being a 1/4 inch too tall. The woman had made it her life's mission to enforce rules that most people did not even know existed. I had managed to avoid her attention, mostly because I kept my property immaculate. My lawn was always perfect, my house was freshly painted in approved colors, and I made sure to follow every ridiculous rule she invented. But apparently, the generator was now on her radar. The knock on my door came at 7 in the morning, just as the sun was struggling to break through the gray, ice-laden clouds. I had been up all night monitoring the generator, checking on my neighbors, and making sure everything was running smoothly. The temperature outside was holding steady at 12 degrees, and the forecast said it would not get above freezing for at least 4 more days. I opened the door to find Gertrude standing on my porch, wrapped in a designer parka that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. Her face was pinched with cold and irritation, a combination that seemed to be her default expression. "Mr. Young, we need to talk about that generator," she said without preamble, not even a good morning or acknowledgement of the crisis situation we were all facing. "What about it?" I kept my voice neutral, though I already felt my blood pressure rising. It needs to be shut off immediately. It is violating noise ordinances and creating an unfair advantage for you during this power outage. I stared at her for a long moment, trying to process what she had just said. Gertrude, that generator is keeping 3 of our neighbors alive. Literally alive. I cannot shut it off. Her eyes narrowed. I do not see anything in your original application about powering other homes. That is a violation of the approved plans. And regardless, the HOA bylaws clearly state that generators can only be run for a maximum of 12 hours during emergencies, and only between the hours of 8 in the morning and 8 at night. Show me where it says that, I demanded. She pulled out her phone with gloved hands and scrolled through something. Section 7, paragraph 14, subsection C of the revised bylaws. Passed 3 months ago. 3 months ago, I never received notice of any bylaw changes. They were posted on the HOA website and mailed to all residents, she said primly. Gertrude, I do not care if they were carved into stone tablets and delivered by angels. I am not shutting off that generator. People will die. That is very dramatic, Mr. Young. I am sure your neighbors can make other arrangements. The power will be back on soon. The power company is saying 3 to 5 days minimum. Tom Henderson needs dialysis. Sophia Martinez needs her ventilator. Robert Johnson needs his oxygen machine. These are not optional things. Gertrude's expression did not change. If anything, she looked more determined. Then they should have made arrangements to go to a hospital or shelter. It is not your responsibility to power the entire neighborhood, and it is certainly not acceptable for you to violate HOA regulations to do so. I have all the proper permits from the county. The HOA approved this installation 2 years ago. That was a different board. I have reviewed your file, and the current configuration violates multiple bylaws. If you do not shut down the generator voluntarily, I will be forced to take action. What kind of action? I was getting angry now, which was probably what she wanted. I can issue fines of $500 per day for each violation. I can also call the police and report you for disturbing the peace. And if necessary, I can file for an emergency injunction to have the generator removed. You are insane, I said flatly. People are going to die without power, and you are worried about your bylaws. I am worried about property values and community standards. If we let one person break the rules, everyone will think they can. Now, I am giving you until 8 o'clock this morning to shut down that generator. After that, I will begin issuing fines and taking legal action. She turned and walked away before I could respond, picking her way carefully across my icy driveway to her SUV that she had left running in front of my house. I stood there in the doorway, letting cold air pour into my house, trying to comprehend what had just happened. Finally, I shut the door and immediately pulled out my phone to call my neighbors. Tom Henderson answered on the second ring. Xavier, please tell me the generator is not going off. Not if I have anything to say about it, but Gertrude just showed up demanding I shut it down. She is threatening fines and legal action. There was a long pause. Xavier, I cannot ask you to risk that for me, but I need you to know that if the power goes off, I have maybe 12 hours before I am in serious medical trouble. I am supposed to do dialysis today. I know. I am not shutting it off. I just wanted you to be aware of what is happening. I called the Martines next. Carlos answered, his voice tight with stress. Is everything okay with the generator? Sophia is doing fine, but she needs that ventilator. The generator is fine. But the HOA president is trying to force me to shut it down. What? Why? Because she is a nightmare human being who cares more about rules than people. I am not doing it, but I wanted you to know there might be some drama. Xavier, if there is anything we can do to help, anything at all, please tell us. Just keep Sophia safe. That is all I care about. The Johnsons took a bit longer to answer, and when Robert finally picked up, he was breathing hard. Sorry, it takes me a while to get to the phone these days. No problem, Robert. I just wanted to let you know that the HOA president is giving me grief about the generator, but I am not shutting it down. Your oxygen will keep running. Son, I do not want you getting in trouble for an old man like me. Robert, you are not just an old man. You are my neighbor, and I am not letting anything happen to you. The generator stays on. After I finished the calls, I contacted my lawyer, Dennis Chen, who had handled the original permits and installation. He did not answer, probably because he had no power at his own house, but I left a detailed voicemail explaining the situation. At 8 o'clock precisely, my doorbell rang again. This time it was not Gertrude but a Richardson police officer, young and looking uncomfortable about being there. Mr. Young, I am Officer Bradley. I received a complaint about a noise disturbance. I invited him in and explained the entire situation, including the medical necessity of the generator. He listened carefully, then shook his head. Sir, I am going to be honest with you. This is not a police matter. Your generator is not violating any city noise ordinances, especially during a declared emergency. The city has actually suspended most noise regulations for the duration of the winter storm specifically to allow generators and other emergency equipment. You are well within your rights to run it. Can you tell that to my HOA president? He grimaced. HOA disputes are civil matters. We cannot get involved unless an actual crime is being committed. My advice: keep doing what you are doing and let her take you to court if she wants. No judge is going to side with her when you have got people on life support. After he left, I felt slightly better, but I knew this was far from over. Sure enough, by noon I had received an official HOA violation notice via email, along with a formal demand to cease generator operation. The fine was listed as $500 per day, retroactive to when the storm began. I forwarded everything to Dennis, who finally called me back around 2 in the afternoon. Xavier, this is one of the most ridiculous things I have ever seen, and I have been practicing law for 20 years. She has absolutely no legal standing to demand you shut off medical equipment during an emergency. The fines are unenforceable. The bylaws she is citing do not supersede county permits or state laws regarding medical necessity. So what do I do? Keep the generator running. Document everything. Save all communications with her. If she pushes this, we will bury her in court. I will draft a cease and desist letter this afternoon and send it to her via email and certified mail once the post office is back open. What about the HOA board? Can they overrule her? Potentially, but you would need to gather enough support from other board members. How many people are on the board? 5, including her. Then you need 3 votes. Do you know the other members? I did, actually. There was Michael Torres, a reasonable guy who coached Little League. Jennifer Walsh, a teacher who had always been friendly. David Kim, a software engineer who kept to himself but seemed sensible. And Patricia Hendricks, who was Gertrude's closest ally and biggest supporter. I can try reaching out to them, I said. Do it. Meanwhile, I will handle the legal side. I spent the next several hours making calls and sending messages to the other board members. Michael responded first, calling me directly. Xavier, I heard about what Gertrude is doing. I think it is completely out of line, but she has been pushing this agenda hard. She called an emergency board meeting for tomorrow morning at her house since she has a generator. Of course she does. Yeah, well, she wants to vote on whether to file for an emergency injunction against you. I am voting no, and I think Jennifer will too. David is harder to read, and Patricia will vote however Gertrude tells her to, so it could go either way. Exactly. You should be at that meeting. It is at 9 in the morning. I will be there. That evening, as I was doing my rounds checking on my neighbors, Tom Henderson caught me outside his house. He looked terrible, pale and shaky. "Xavier, I just got a call from Gertrude. She told me that you were running the generator illegally and that I needed to disconnect from it immediately. She said if I do not, she will fine me too." "She cannot do that, Tom. Just ignore her." "But what if she is right? What if you get in serious trouble because of me?" "Tom, listen to me. You are not disconnecting anything. You are going to do your dialysis and you are going to be fine. Gertrude is blowing smoke. She has no legal authority to do any of this." He nodded slowly, but I could see the worry in his eyes. This was exactly what Gertrude wanted, to scare people into compliance. I found out later that evening that she had made similar calls to the Martinez and Johnson families, trying to convince them to disconnect from my generator. Carlos Martinez was furious and had apparently told her exactly where she could stick her threats. Maria had been crying when they called me to confirm they were not disconnecting anything. The next morning, I walked through 8 inches of snow and ice to get to Gertrude's house 4 streets over. The temperature had dropped to 6 degrees overnight, and the weather service was now saying the freeze would last at least 6 days total, possibly longer. The power company had updated their estimate to 4 to 7 days for restoration in our area. Gertrude's house was lit up like Christmas, her generator humming quietly in a custom enclosure that probably cost as much as a car. I rang the doorbell and was greeted by Patricia Hendricks, who looked at me like I was something unpleasant she had stepped in. "The meeting is in the dining room," she said curtly. The other board members were already there. Michael gave me a supportive nod. Jennifer smiled warmly. David looked up from his phone and gave a neutral greeting. Gertrude sat at the head of the table, papers spread out in front of her like she was chairing a corporate board meeting. "Mr. Young, you are not invited to this meeting," she said immediately. "Michael invited me, and since this meeting is about me, I have a right to be here. This is a closed board meeting. You have no rights here." Jennifer spoke up. "Actually, Gertrude, HOA bylaws state that any homeowner who is the subject of a board action has the right to be present and speak in their defense. It is in Section 3, Paragraph 2. Gertrude's face tightened, but she could not dispute it. "Fine. Sit down. Let us make this quick." I took a seat next to Michael while Gertrude launched into what could only be described as a prosecutorial presentation. She had charts, photos of my generator, printouts of the bylaws, and a whole narrative about how I was undermining the HOA's authority and setting a dangerous precedent. If we allow Mr. Young to flagrantly violate our bylaws, what message does that send to the rest of the community? That rules do not matter, that anyone can do whatever they want as long as they claim it is an emergency. "It is an emergency," Michael interrupted. "We are in the middle of a winter storm. People need power." "Then they should have prepared better, or they should go to a shelter." "It is not Mr. Young's responsibility to power half the neighborhood, and it is certainly not acceptable for him to do so in violation of our bylaws." "Which bylaws specifically?" Jennifer asked. Gertrude rattled off several sections, including noise restrictions, the generator operation hours, and something about unauthorized electrical connections between properties. David Kim spoke for the first time. "I reviewed those bylaws last night. The noise restriction has an exception for emergency equipment. The generator operation hours do not apply during declared emergencies per state law, and the electrical connections were done with proper county permits, which supersede HOA regulations." Gertrude glared at him. "That is your interpretation. No, that is what the law says. I also looked into it. Can I speak now? I asked. Gertrude waved a hand dismissively. Make it quick. I stood up, pulling out my phone. 3 families are connected to my generator. Tom Henderson needs dialysis 4 times a week, or his kidneys will fail. Sofia Martinez is 8 years old and needs a ventilator to breathe because of muscular dystrophy. Robert Johnson has end-stage COPD and needs continuous oxygen. Without power, these people will die, not might die. Not could die, will die. That is not dramatic. That is medical fact. I pulled up photos on my phone, pictures the families had given me permission to show. Sophia in her bed with her ventilator. Tom connected to his dialysis machine. Robert with his oxygen tubes. These are our neighbors. These are people we see at community events, whose kids play in the park, who wave to us when we get our mail. And you want me to shut off their life support because of a bylaw about generator noise? Jennifer was wiping her eyes. Michael looked angry. Even David seemed moved. Patricia sat stone-faced next to Gertrude, who looked annoyed at my emotional appeal. This is not about the people, Gertrude said coldly. This is about rules and property values. If word gets out that our HOA has no authority, that people can just do whatever they want, our home values will plummet. I am protecting everyone's investment. You are protecting your ego, Michael said sharply. This is insane, Gertrude. I call for a vote. All in favor of dropping all actions against Xavier Young. I have not called for a vote yet, Gertrude snapped. I am a board member. I can call for a vote. Fine. All opposed to Mr. Young's generator operation. Gertrude and Patricia raised their hands. All in favor of allowing it. Michael and Jennifer raised their hands immediately. Everyone looked at David, who sat quietly for a long moment. David, Gertrude's voice had a warning tone. I vote in favor of allowing the generator. This is not a close call legally or morally. Gertrude's face went red. This is not over. I will take this to the full HOA membership. I will call a special meeting. You do that, Michael said. But until then, Xavier is in the clear, and you need to stop harassing him and his neighbors. I left the meeting feeling cautiously optimistic, but I knew Gertrude was not going to let this go. Sure enough, by that afternoon, she had sent out an email blast to every homeowner in the subdivision calling for an emergency HOA meeting in 3 days to discuss unauthorized generator usage and board member misconduct. The meeting was scheduled for 3 in the afternoon at the community center, which hopefully would have power by then. In the meantime, I kept my generator running and tried to ignore the constant stream of hostile emails from Gertrude. But something interesting started happening. Other neighbors began reaching out to me in support. People I barely knew were sending messages thanking me for helping the Hendersons, Martinses, and Johnsons. Someone started a petition supporting me that got over 100 signatures in the first day. A local news station somehow heard about the situation and reached out for an interview. I was hesitant about the media attention, but Dennis thought it was a good idea. Public pressure is your friend here. The more people know what is happening, the harder it will be for Gertrude to keep pushing this. So I agreed to an interview with Channel 8 News. They came out the next day, filming the generator, interviewing me, and talking to my neighbors. Tom Henderson gave a powerful statement about how I had saved his life. Maria Martinez brought Sofia outside briefly to show how she needed her ventilator. Robert Johnson talked about being a veteran who just wanted to live his final years in peace. The story aired that evening and immediately went viral. By the next morning, it had been picked up by national news outlets. I was getting calls and messages from all over the country. The overwhelming sentiment was shock and outrage that an HOA would try to shut off medical equipment during an emergency. Gertrude, predictably, doubled down. She gave her own interview to a different news station, claiming she was being unfairly vilified for trying to enforce reasonable community standards. She portrayed herself as the victim of a media which hunt and insisted that people were misunderstanding her position. "I never said anyone should die," she told the reporter, her voice dripping with false concern. "I simply believe there are proper channels and procedures. Mr. Young should have consulted the board before setting up this elaborate electrical system. For all we know, it could be dangerous." The reporter asked if she was suggesting the generator was unsafe, and Gertrude backpedaled quickly, saying she was not an expert but that these were the kinds of questions that needed to be asked. By the time the HOA meeting rolled around, the community center had power restored, and it seemed like half the subdivision showed up. The room was packed, with people standing along the walls and spilling out into the hallway. Local news crews were there too, cameras set up in the back. Gertrude tried to run the meeting like a formal proceeding, but the crowd was having none of it. As soon as she opened the floor for discussion, people started shouting questions and comments. "Why are you attacking Xavier? What is wrong with you? My kid plays with Sophia Martinez." "You wanted to shut off her ventilator." Gertrude banged a gavel, actually had brought a gavel, and demanded order. "This is not a mob rule situation. We will follow proper meeting procedures." Michael Torres stood up. "Then let us start with a motion. I move that we immediately cease all actions against Xavier Young and formally thank him for his humanitarian efforts in keeping our neighbors alive during this crisis." "Seconded," Jennifer Walsh called out immediately. "We need to discuss this first," Gertrude protested. "No, we do not," David Kim said, standing as well. "This is a simple vote, all in favor." A thunderous chorus of "aye" filled the room. Even people who were not board members were voting. All opposed. Gertrude and Patricia said nay quietly, but they were drowned out by the overwhelming support. "Motion carries," Michael announced. "Gertrude, it is over. Drop this." But Gertrude was not done. She stood up, her face flushed with anger and humiliation. "You people do not understand what you are doing. You are setting a precedent that will destroy this community. Mark my words, property values will plummet, and it will be on all of your heads. The only thing destroying this community is you," someone shouted from the back. The meeting devolved from there, with multiple people calling for Gertrude's resignation. She refused, claiming she was elected to a 2-year term and intended to serve it out. Finally, Michael took control of the meeting and officially ended it, announcing that the board would meet separately to discuss next steps. I thought that would be the end of it, but I seriously underestimated Gertrude's capacity for vindictiveness. 2 days later, with power finally restored to most of the subdivision, I came home to find that someone had filed a complaint with the city about my generator, claiming it was installed without proper permits. This was completely false, as I had every permit and inspection document, but it still required me to spend a day at the city building department proving my compliance. Then, I received notice that the HOA was fining me $15,000 for accumulated violations during the storm. Dennis immediately filed a response, but it was clear Gertrude was going to make me fight for every inch. The real escalation came a week after the storm ended. I woke up one morning to find that someone had vandalized my generator. The fuel line had been cut, the control panel had been smashed, and someone had spray-painted "Rules Matter" across the enclosure. I called the police immediately. The responding officer took photos, collected evidence, and filed a report for criminal mischief. When I mentioned the ongoing HOA dispute, his expression darkened. "You think your HOA president did this?" "I do not know who did it, but she has been on a crusade against this generator for weeks. We will investigate. In the meantime, you might want to install security cameras." I did exactly that, putting up a comprehensive camera system covering my entire property. The generator was going to cost about $8,000 to repair, and my insurance company was treating it as vandalism with a criminal investigation pending. But here is where things got interesting. One of my neighbors, Margaret Reeves, who lived 2 doors down from Gertrude, came to me 3 days after the vandalism with her own security footage. Her camera, which covered her driveway, had caught something very interesting at 2 in the morning on the night my generator was destroyed. The video showed Gertrude Patterson, clear as day under the streetlight, walking down the street carrying a bag. She was not walking toward her house but away from it, in the direction of my property. The timestamp was 2:17 a.m. Margaret's camera lost sight of her after she passed out of frame, but she never came back past the camera going the opposite direction, which meant she must have taken a different route back. I immediately took the footage to the police. They enhanced it, confirmed it was Gertrude, and combined it with my camera footage, which had been destroyed by the vandal, but not before capturing a figure matching Gertrude's height and build approaching the generator around 2:25 a.m. The detective assigned to the case, Detective Sarah Morrison, was thorough and professional. She obtained a warrant to search Gertrude's home and found the spray paint can, still partially full, hidden in her garage. The paint matched exactly what was used on my generator. They also found bolt cutters with metal residue that matched the cut fuel line. Gertrude was arrested on charges of criminal mischief and destruction of property. The bail was set at $10,000, which she posted immediately, and she was released pending trial. But the damage to her reputation was done. The HOA board held an emergency meeting and voted 4-1, with Gertrude abstaining, to remove her as president and to censure her for conduct unbecoming of a board member. Patricia Hendricks resigned from the board entirely rather than vote on the matter, claiming the whole thing was a conspiracy against Gertrude. Michael Torres became the new HOA president, and his first official act was to void all fines against me and to issue a formal apology on behalf of the HOA. The community rallied around me in an overwhelming show of support. Someone organized a fundraiser to help cover my generator repair costs, and they raised over $12,000, more than enough to fix everything and upgrade the security even further. The Hendersons, Martinses, and Johnsons all wrote letters to the local paper praising my actions during the storm and condemning Gertrude's behavior. Sofia Martinez even made a poster for me with crayons that said, "Thank you, Mr. Xavier, for keeping me alive," with drawings of hearts and flowers. I hung it in my home office where I could see it every day. Gertrude's trial came up 4 months later. Dennis recommended a good criminal defense attorney for me to consult with as a victim in the case, and I attended every hearing. The evidence was overwhelming. The footage, the physical evidence, the timeline, all of it pointed directly to Gertrude. Her lawyer tried to argue that she was under extreme stress and not thinking clearly, that the media attention and public shaming had caused a mental breakdown. The prosecutor was having none of it, pointing out that the vandalism was calculated and deliberate, done in the middle of the night when she thought no one would see. The jury found her guilty on all counts after less than 2 hours of deliberation. The judge sentenced her to 2 years of probation, 200 hours of community service, and ordered her to pay full restitution for the damage to my generator plus court costs. She was also required to undergo anger management counseling, but the consequences did not end there. The HOA board voted to permanently ban her from ever serving in any leadership position again. Several of her friends in the neighborhood stopped talking to her. Her husband, who I had barely seen throughout this entire ordeal, filed for divorce 6 months after the trial, citing irreconcilable differences. The most fitting consequence, in my opinion, was that Gertrude ended up having to sell her house and move out of the neighborhood. The social ostracism was too much, and she could not handle running into people who knew what she had done. The house sold for slightly below market value, a bit of irony considering all her talk about property values. As for me, life gradually returned to normal. The generator was repaired and upgraded with additional security features. I worked with the new HOA board to create official guidelines for emergency power sharing during disasters, establishing a framework that would allow other residents to help each other without running into the kind of problems I had faced. Tom Henderson continued his dialysis treatments and actually got approved for a kidney transplant list. Sophia Martinez started 3rd grade and was doing well with her treatments. Robert Johnson passed away peacefully in his sleep a year after the storm, but he lived long enough to see his great-grandson born, something that might not have happened if the power had gone out that week. The families threw a joint thank-you party for me on the 1-year anniversary of the storm. It was held at the community center, which the new HOA board had graciously approved without any bureaucratic nonsense. There were probably 75 people there, neighbors who wanted to show their appreciation for standing up to Gertrude's tyranny. Michael Torres gave a speech about community values and how sometimes doing the right thing means standing up to authority, even when it is difficult. Jennifer Walsh presented me with a plaque that read, "Xavier Young, Neighborhood Hero and Keeper of the Power." Maria Martinez made an incredible spread of food, and Tom Henderson led everyone in a toast. "To Xavier," he said, raising his glass, "who proved that being a good neighbor means more than following rules. It means caring about people." Everyone cheered and clinked glasses. I felt genuinely moved by the outpouring of support and affection. These were good people, and I was proud to be part of this community. Later that evening, as I was helping clean up, Carlos Martinez pulled me aside. "Xavier, I do not think I ever properly thanked you. You saved my daughter's life." "There are no words adequate for that, but I want you to know that my family will never forget what you did." "You would have done the same for me," I said. "Maybe, but I did not have to prove it. You did. And you did not hesitate even when it cost you. It had cost me, actually." Between legal fees, generator repairs, time off work, and general stress, I estimated the whole ordeal had cost me around $30,000 and probably a few years off my life from the anxiety. But looking around that room, seeing Sophia playing with other kids, watching Tom laugh with his wife, remembering Robert's grateful smile, I knew it was worth it. The winter of 2025 taught me several important lessons. First, that small-minded people in positions of minor authority can cause enormous harm if left unchecked. Second, that standing up for what is right is rarely easy or convenient. Third, that most people are fundamentally good and will support you if you are fighting for something that truly matters. But the most important lesson was about community. Real community is not about rules and regulations and property values. It is about looking out for each other, especially the most vulnerable among us. It is about recognizing that we are all interconnected, and that sometimes the most important thing we can do is simply keep someone's lights on when everything else goes dark. Gertrude Patterson never understood that. She saw the HOA as a way to exercise control and enforce conformity. She measured success in terms of compliance and obedience. She thought property values were more important than human lives. She was wrong, and ultimately, that wrongness cost her everything she cared about. Her position, her reputation, her marriage, even her home. All because she could not see past her own rigid worldview to recognize basic human decency. I still live in Willow Creek subdivision. The new HOA board is reasonable and focused on actual community improvement rather than petty rule enforcement. We have had 2 more winter storms since 2025, though nothing as severe, and both times multiple neighbors have shared generator power without any issues or complaints. My generator still sits in my backyard, humming to life whenever there is a power outage. It is connected to the Henderson house, though Tom eventually got his transplant and does not need the dialysis equipment anymore. It is connected to the Martinez house, where Sophia continues to grow stronger each year. And it is connected to the Williams house, the family who bought the Johnson property after Robert passed, because they have a daughter with diabetes whose insulin needs refrigeration. The generator has become something of a neighborhood symbol, a reminder of that winter when we learned what really matters. Kids in the neighborhood know about it. New residents hear the story. It has become part of the community lore. Sometimes, late at night when I cannot sleep, I go out and look at that generator and think about how close we came to tragedy. How different things would have been if I had backed down, if I had let Gertrude intimidate me into shutting it off. How Tom might have gone into kidney failure. How Sophia might have stopped breathing. How Robert might have died gasping for air. But that did not happen. I kept the generator running and everyone survived. 3 families stayed in their homes with the power and medical support they needed. And in the end, the community came together to do what was right. That is what neighbors do. That is what communities do. We take care of each other, especially when times are hard. We do not let arbitrary rules and petty tyrants come between us and basic human compassion. We stand up for what is right, even when it is difficult, even when it costs us something. Gertrude Patterson learned that lesson the hard way. I just hope she actually learned it, wherever she ended up. I hope she eventually understood that being part of a community means more than enforcing bylaws. It means caring about the people around you, recognizing their humanity, and sometimes putting their needs ahead of your own comfort or desire for control. As for me, I sleep well at night knowing that when my neighbors needed help, I was there. I did not hesitate. I did not calculate the cost. I just did what needed to be done. And while I would never want to go through that experience again, I would not change my decisions for anything. Because at the end of the day, we are all just people trying to get through this life together. And sometimes, keeping someone else's lights on is the most important thing we can do. Even if it means standing up to a HOA Karen who cares more about rules than lives. The generator still hums in my backyard on cold nights, a steady, reassuring sound that means my neighbors are safe and warm. And every time I hear it, I smile and think about how a simple machine and a stubborn refusal to back down changed everything for the better. That is the power of community. That is the power of standing up for what is right. And that is why I will never regret a single moment of the fight, because in the end, we won. Not just legally, but morally. We proved that people matter more than property values, that lives matter more than bylaws, and that a good neighbor is worth more than 100 petty tyrants. Gertrude Patterson thought she could bully me into submission. She thought her position and her rules gave her power over life and death. She was wrong. And now she is gone while the rest of us are still here, still looking out for each other, still keeping the lights on when darkness falls. That is how it should be. That is how it will always be as long as there are people willing to stand up and fight for what matters. And in Willow Creek subdivision, we learned that lesson well. We learned it in the coldest, darkest days of winter, when everything seemed frozen and hopeless. We learned that sometimes the most revolutionary act is simply refusing to shut off the generator. Sometimes the most heroic thing is just keeping someone alive. And sometimes the most important battle is fought not with weapons or arguments, but with simple persistence and an unwavering commitment to doing the right thing. That is my story. That is how one HOA Karen's obsession with rules and control led to her own downfall, while 3 families stayed alive and a community came together. It was not easy, it was not simple, and it certainly was not cheap. But it was worth it. Every single day it was worth it.